All right, it is May 11th. This is the PFF Forecast. We've got a couple of cool things that we're doing today. We're going to talk a little Dak, some Deshaun. We've got the first iteration of the 2020 season simulated. That's going to be fun to talk about. So we'll go through and look at projections for those teams. And then apparently you've got some great Mother's Day stories. I don't know. You just threw this in the doc, so I'm going to have to get some information, some more information on that. That's what we've got today. So let's rock. Mother's Day. What'd you do?
Well, it was my second daughter's 6th birthday as well. So it was it was a lot. I bought a nice dinner from Ruth Chris. Had to go pick it up downtown. It's a ghost town. We had the fire department drive by and honk at Chloe when she was standing outside. Yeah, it was an eventful day. I don't feel the hard part with Mother's Day and a birthday being on the same day. I don't feel like either person felt like they got enough, which is always a little disappointing. Yeah,
because I was going to say that maybe the issue you had is you didn't know which one to tweet about, because I didn't really know if you were celebrating either, to be honest, because I didn't see a formal tweet talking about either your wife or your daughter or how thankful you were for both of them. That's the thing that I can't stand with this stuff is people just
my mother doesn't even follow me on, my mom and I aren't even friends on Facebook anymore. So why would I even post other than
that sounds like a bigger issue, to be honest.
Yeah. Of course, but why would I even tweet it out? Who cares? Not to say that I don't care about my mom. I'm just saying that no one else, I could say Happy Mother's Day to her if I wanted to, but I don't need to say it to 14,000 followers or whatever. Right.
Yep. That's honestly the piece that I just don't get. And I did some muting of some people yesterday because I was just I just can't, I just don't want to see that today. I don't need it from you. Go do what you want for your mother. I'll do what I can for my mother, and we'll call it a day. And then we'll watch The Last Dance together, and everyone will tweet about that at the same time. Here's the big news. I've punted on the hair situation, and I'm going hat. I'm probably going hat from now on out. I got one hat that I brought with me. I'm still living out of a suitcase.
Surprised about the one hat, frankly.
You know what? If I had some foresight, I thought, look, there's a chance that I don't go back to Cincinnati for a while. My hair won't get cut, and I'll need a hat. So I have a hat. That's my news. What do you want to get into first here?
Well, did you watch the UFC, our first live sporting event in the United States in 2 months?
No, I didn't. Did you?
I didn't. I did gamble on it though.
So you bet on it, didn't watch, woke up the next morning and just checked?
Yeah. There was I have friends I follow on Twitter that were jokingly talking about which side they were taking. Me, the junkie at this point, just put $25 on a few plays. I think I ended up even, maybe a little down. And yeah, it didn't make me feel any more alive, which was, I think, Dana White's goal. In fact, I think a few people felt a little less alive after.
Well, I saw some pictures.
Yeah, but it was, So you were not a UFC aficionado. You're waiting until the golf match.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to bet on Manning, Brady, Woods, Mickelson. So it's Phil and Tom versus Tiger and Peyton. And I think Tiger and Peyton are kind of going to smoke them because they just have so many advantages. Here's my thing though with the UFC. I've bought in fights. I've purchased fights before, and have just not felt like I got anywhere near my money's worth. And for $70, we're lucky enough to have jobs, but I'm still not at a point where I'm just kind of tossing $70 out there. That's a meal. I'm fine without it.
Nice
so I did not.
By the way. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'm all the way down as far as entertainment's concerned to ESPN Plus, but like the normal version, just out of respect, like $5 a month, and then Netflix and Amazon Prime. I'm not even Hulu right now. I'm not Sling. Like, there's no college football on. There's no XFL on even, right? So like, what's the point? Like, and to pay like basically what it costs to get Hulu for a month for just a bunch of fights when I don't really get what's sort of going on, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Are you? This will be the last non-football related question. Are you saving money right now?
As far as
Like, just because of the whole pandemic thing, do you feel like you're saving money?
on one hand, yes, like there's we're not driving cars, right? So like there's none of that. We're not traveling, so we're not going to see family or anything. So there's that. We're mostly saying yes to like everything though that the girls want. So like iPads, we bought an inflatable pool in the backyard. I would say net yes, but yeah, it's not like, it's not a come up, and it, it's, but there are things we're saving on, but then we're also like ordering food more, which is costly.
That's the thing. I find myself every night being on the precipice of like, well, maybe I should just order out. And I don't know. It's tough. I would say I'm in the same boat.
Well, because you can convince yourself like, hey, look, I'm like helping this like Chinese restaurant down the street.
Right.
And you don't realize that you're like, they're paying through the roof for DoorDash fees and stuff.
Dude, so the thing that I did for my mom for Mother's Day was I like ordered her dinner and had it delivered. And so she's not in a place where she can drive right now because she's with my sister who just had a procedure and can't really get in the car. So it had to be delivery. And the place that I really wanted was 3.5 miles away, and they only deliver within a 3-mile radius. And so it took up way more of my day than I wanted to.
That's not as bad as the time I went rogue and I think I ordered Chipotle, but on the Chipotle app because it was like BOGO, and I forgot to switch the address from our office to my house. And so I get this call from some like number and like random Virginia number saying, hey, I got your stuff. I'm like, well, where are you? It's like Central Parkway. And of course, like I'm sinking, right? Because I'm like, it's not a trivial drive down there.
Yeah.
Like,
did you go pick it up?
Yeah, I did. I mean, okay. And I gave her like an extra like $10 or something. Like I don't know. I mean, this is this is a trying time for all of us. And like, and then here's the thing. If this is trying for us, obviously we understand that it's a lot worse for others, and we have sympathy.
Right. That's a good point. I've been tipping. I've been very generous with my tipping. Tess and Boog are no longer. That was kind of the other news from this week. Yep. And I'm just very curious. So here's my take on the whole thing. I really do not believe that Tess and Boog were driving people away from Monday Night Football. No one was tuning in or tuning out because of them. To me, this was ESPN looks at who they have in their talent pool, and they go, we might lose Dan Orlovsky, we might lose Louis Riddick if we don't put them in there right now. And so my gut would tell me they're going to put those two guys or one of those two guys in there just a year early, just so they don't lose them down the road. But I feel like it's going to be a loss because I loved, as much as I disagreed with some of the things that Boog said, he brought comedic relief. I don't know that those other two will.
It's not Booger's fault that the second Monday Night Football game of the year was Oakland versus Denver. It's not Boog's fault that the second Monday Night Football game was Trevor Siemian and the Jets against the Browns. Like the games on Monday Night Football, there were some good ones. Like Vikings Seahawks was good. Seahawks Niners was good. There were a few others, but the schedule is what's the worst part about that. Like, and Boog at least will draw a penis on the field or something and like entertain us. And, and he doesn't take himself too seriously, which I think maybe his successor will. And I don't know, the whole like, hey, let's get rid of these guys so we don't lose these other, just reminds me of like when the Bucks fired Lovie Smith so they could keep Dirk Cutter. Like, okay, be careful what you wish for.
I am very curious to see who shows up in the play-by-play role, because that's the area where I just don't see it naturally. Like maybe it's Steve Levy, but um, there doesn't seem like there's a rising star there. Whereas you feel as though, okay, Orlovsky, Riddick, perfect for that situation. It's sad though, because I legitimately thought Boog, got like totally the short end of the stick, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna put you on a buggy in the middle of the field. People are gonna hate you because
Yeah.
you're blocking their view. And then we're gonna kick Witt out, and we're gonna bring you up because you can't possibly be as bad as Witt. And then, at the same time, you've got Joe Tessitore who thinks he's calling a boxing match like next to you, and it was a lose-lose situation for him. I hope he finds something that he can actually get like a fair shot at. Because if you would just put a decent play-by-play guy, I feel like that could have been the move. But clearly, they're
Well,
moving on. I'm sad.
and I think it's tricky because the smart move in my opinion. I mean, the last time, obviously Mike Tirico's not coming back, but he was great.
Nope.
Prior to Mike, though, it was Mike Patrick who was doing Sunday Night Football before NBC took over. And yeah, he's getting longer in the tooth, but like sometimes, I mean, that job, would you guess that like the color guy is more like a skill position player and the play-by-play guy is more like a lineman, where you kind of have to like, the play-by-play guy's just got to not screw up and kind of set the table. And there's like, it's obviously less, if the play-by-play guy's brilliant, it's less of a marginal benefit than the marginal loss if he's terrible, right? And
Oh, I'd
if
agree
you
there. I'd agree.
if you
That's
get
a good comparison. Yeah.
if you give like, if you say, okay, like let's get Mike Patrick in there. I mean, he's a little older, but he was terrific when he did it prior. And like, unless the guy's become Dick Stockton and completely lost his fastball 10 years ago, we'll be fine. And then, yeah, let's try to get a color guy who's a force multiplier. Now, I mean, not to dig, I think Louis Riddick will probably be fine. I'm not a huge fan of Orlovsky, but like Kurt Warner would be great. Nate Burleson would be awesome. Like Nate's like one of the better thinkers in
He
all
is
of
good.
football media, in my opinion. Like there's a ton of things you can do there. But that's a place where I think like brilliance really does enhance the whole thing. I mean, you see with that NBC, first they had Madden in there who was he's awesome and brought so much. And then Chris came in and did it in a different way, but every bit, elevated that to what it is today. The play-by-play guy, like you just need to get the ball in the green kind of, I think.
If you brought in a play-by-play guy that was trying to be boring and just let the other guys do stuff, you wouldn't lose a ton. What you lost with Tessitore was that he was just like losing his mind after screen calls by Andy Reid, right? And it's just like this is taking away from the overall juice of the thing.
Which is
What if they
one
did?
of the reasons why people hate Buck, and people pretended like they didn't like Pat Summerall, but those guys were great because they let the play breathe a little bit.
Yeah, and Al is great because he just talks. Like he's just so good at it that it's just him having a conversation and talking about the game, and he doesn't overdo anything. Buck, I think, has gotten way better at that. Like to me, Buck as of late has been more casual, a little more just kind of loose with it, and I think that's helped quite a bit.
Well,
if I
was an aspiring play-by-play person, I would not try to be like Al Michaels though, because Al has so much more talent than everybody else. It'd be, if you tried to replicate that, it'd be hard, right? Whereas at least if you could try to be more like Summerall and Buck, which I think Buck has evolved into, and I think it's a smart move on his side. Like, don't you agree? Like Al just is like, I don't know. It's sort of like trying to replicate Mahomes' arm talent, right?
Well, Al's obviously amazing at it. He has a great voice, but he's gotten so many reps in so many big situations that he's just kind of always drawing on being excellent in some area, right? Like he's just done it all. So if you're going to come in there and be like, I'm going to just all of a sudden do this, you can't, because you haven't had that much time and that much experience. So yeah, obviously not. I would say if you're going to come in and be good as a play-by-play guy, the number one thing you have to have is an understanding of what your color guy's doing, right? Like that, you have to understand exactly how they process the game when they're going to say what they're going to say, and that's going to help you not, overdo it. It'll be interesting to see who they bring in. Okay, let's talk a little bit about let's get the Watson Chicago thing out of the way here. So there've been conflicting reports. He says the Bears never talked to me. Then there's some tweets that surface of him on the Rich Eisen show saying that he talked to the Bears. Who do you believe?
No, I firmly believe that the Bears at least had some contact with him. And the hard part is that we want to paint this. The hard part is the truth is nuanced here, right? Because the whole reason this started was it Doug Gottlieb said that, like, NFL teams don't take race into consideration when they draft QBs.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the hard part. They totally do. Like, if you look at history, we've gotten a lot better. And, the fact that, I don't know, 70% of the top quarterbacks in the NFL are African-American now is a testament to that. But if you, and our colleague Kevin Cole, tweeted this out. If you look at, sort of, the consensus wisdom of, draft experts is still as biased towards white quarterbacks and white quarterbacks that are of certain stature. That doesn't mean that any one particular team is acting out of racism when they draft a white quarterback or don't consider a black quarterback as highly as everybody else does, right? They're just responding to the marketplace. And so people get offended when you're like, well, you point out that, like, Lamar Jackson was drafted 25 spots below Josh Allen. That isn't to imply, like, almost everybody had that ordering except for, maybe us, I think. That's not to imply the actual team that executed that draft pick is doing so nefariously. The same thing with the Bears. Like, the fact that the Bears we had Trubisky ahead of Watson, and that probably an error, right? They're just responding to the marketplace. The individual actors I don't think is the place to put any of the blame here. It's the consensus, right? And the consensus has biases built in, right? I mean, that's a tough thing to say because we all want to build villains, but I don't think the villain is concentrated here.
I would agree. I mean, I thought if it really was the case that the Chicago Bears did not talk to Deshaun Watson before the draft, like, that's just a fireable offense, right? To just not do due diligence on the top 5, 10, 15 quarterbacks if you're going to draft a quarterback. That's just a huge error on the side of the Bears for not, regardless of skin color, obviously, not doing due diligence. But it is a super interesting situation where we're at in the league. And you mentioned the thing that I thought was most striking is that so many of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now are African-American, which is awesome to see. And that's despite, I think, the inherent biases, which are, hey, if the guy looks like Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence, he just has a leg up. And the way that people are going to describe the guy's weaknesses are not going to be nearly as I don't know what the right word is here. They're not going to be nearly as sharp as they would be if it were for someone that looks different than them. So,
and there's another thing. I mean, there's a survivorship bias too, right? In my opinion, like, and I don't have the data in front of me, but I'm, more or less just making, an educated guess that, about socioeconomic status. But if you are, and this isn't true about Fields, we actually talked about this with Seth, but, like, many times if you are from a more disadvantaged economic standing, right, you don't get to go to the camps, you don't get to go to you don't get groomed, right? And somebody who's been groomed, like, think about Christian Hackenberg, somebody who's been groomed from the moment that they stepped on a football field all the way to when they're selected second round by the Jets, hasn't dealt with adversity, hasn't had to prove anybody wrong, hasn't had to, the NFL is the first time that they feel any sort of perturbation, and, like, they respond accordingly. But somebody like, look at, like, Russell Wilson. I mean, I'm actually not sure about his background in terms of, like, whether he, was privileged in any sort of way, but he goes to NC State. He starts there for 3 or 4 years. He gets replaced by Mike Glennon, right? Graduates, goes to Wisconsin, goes to the Rose Bowl, gets drafted third. Like, there's none of that is like a privileged situation. He's dealing with setbacks the whole time. And so when he gets in the NFL, and the NFL is just constant setbacks for literally every single quarterback. Mahomes' kneecap was on the backside of his knee last year at one time, right? There may be just more of a response there. Deshaun Watson was, he had 2 game-winning drives against Alabama in a national championship game, and he ended up winning one of them. Like, there's just so much more there, in terms of possibly having to overcome things, that I think the survivorship bias is such that if a player comes out of that group, they're probably going to be better just by what they've withstood.
Guess where Russell Wilson was born?
Fayette, North Carolina.
Nah, Cincinnati.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
See, all we do is produce Joe Burrow and now Russell Wilson.
The Christ Hospital in Cincinnati. He grew up in Richmond, Virginia. His dad played football and baseball at Dartmouth and was a wide receiver for the now non-existent San Diego Chargers.
Okay, so he has there's some privilege there for sure.
I guess. Yeah, and it looks like his entire family is pretty athletic. But I mean, it just brings up like kind of a larger point, which is, not all things in life are fair, and we're not in a place where everyone is doing things the right way yet, and we can still have these good conversations that move us forward. The bigger thing here is that the Bears might have given less of a thought to Deshaun Watson than Mitch Trubisky, right? They didn't give him the same shot at earning that high of a draft grade, right? Like, I think that seems to me the takeaway.
Yeah.
Right?
Have we resolved, though, the fact that in the same draft, the 49ers are basically in the same draft position, and, we're not interested in Mahomes? You know what I mean? Like, I would say that's where I say that I don't think any of the blame is concentrated on individual decision makers at some level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's just that all of us thought Mahomes was an erratic quarterback when the data suggested in his final season that was not true,
Right.
And, everybody talk about Watson's arm strength, and I think that's still a legitimate concern, but whereas with Trubisky, like, we all just grab it. We forgot the fact that Marquise Williams started over him for 3 years.
That is actually a really interesting question, to go back and look at why the Niners were not considering either of those two guys.
I mean, I think it's one of Shanahan's weaknesses in that he zeroes in on particular players, right? Because he was waiting for Cousins to become a free agent in 2018. He zeroes in on, in the news this week, Jerick McKinnon, Tevin Cole, like, you know what I mean? Where
mm-hmm.
I think he's a little bit too precise in that way, right? And that might be that, obviously it hasn't been his downfall yet, but might be.
Yeah, it's like they'd basically just decided, hey, we're not going to invest there this season, and everyone just kind of accepted that was going to be the case. And yeah, and you end up with Solomon Thomas, which is a whole different.
You can get heat up the middle, though.
I feel bad for Solomon
defensive
Thomas.
Line coach that passed away today, John Teerlink.
It's not Solomon Thomas's fault that happened. Poor guy. Anything else on the whole Watson Bears thing? What is fascinating to me about Watson is, like, where is he even playing, in a couple of years?
Well, you saw my tweet that said, should we back off of Ryan Pace a little bit, because for thinking Trubisky was good 3 years ago, when last season everybody in Bear Down Nation was telling us how stupid we were for thinking Trubisky wasn't a top flight quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, Pace was just 2 years ahead of all of you.
The tough thing for Ryan Pace, and reading that long article that was like kind of detailing the process, was that it seemed pretty clear that he was trying to do the right thing, but had fallen in love with Trubisky way earlier than anyone in the right mind should have.
Yep.
And, if I'm paraphrasing here, basically he had tabbed Trubisky as the guy. He didn't tell anyone in the organization, and wanted to see if they came to the same conclusion. Now they did, and so it was like, they were sold on it. But he locked in on a guy that you probably should just never lock in on, at that position that early to begin with. And then certainly a guy like Trubisky, you should not lock in on that early in the process either, and probably, miss the opportunity to maybe be swayed in a different direction than Trubisky. Certainly maybe not to trade up and maybe even move down and say, hey, wherever the chips fall, they fall.
Yeah.
But
It's hard, right? I mean,
yeah, it's tough. Honestly, the only thing, the toughest thing for me is the fact that he traded up.
right. The Niners, I mean, you just have to read the market better, right? You gave up a significant amount for him. None of us are going to be, so for example, the Chiefs, and I'm not trying to, always bring it back to them, but the Chiefs gave up a decent amount to move up from 27 to 10 in the same draft. And one of those draft picks was Tre'Davious White. And no one cares, right? Because he ends up being good. I mean, the true issue, the trade up is bad, but a trade up for a quarterback, I think I'll always forgive. I'm not upset that the Packers traded up for Jordan Love. I'm upset that they drafted Jordan Love, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Trubisky, by all, projection, Trubisky's a better, okay, here's a question. Is Trubisky better than Josh Allen?
No.
Okay. Just because Allen will run more?
Yeah, I think they're both. So this is a great question. Would you rather have Trubisky or Josh Allen?
I'd rather have
Trubisky,
Josh Allen because of the unknown, but I'm wondering about currently because Trubisky's best season was better than Allen last year.
this is fascinating. Here's the thing with Trubisky. Mentally, I just think the ship has sailed. So if you're saying from this point on, it's Josh
I don't
Allen.
think it's a question because there's the unknown with Allen.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's not even a question. So are you saying, look, if we went back and looked at it, 2 years ago, is that what you're getting at?
I'm saying who is a better prospect?
Oh, who's a better prospect? Yeah, well, Trubisky was a better prospect.
Mm-hmm. And Trubisky so far has been the better player.
Yeah, it's just a matter of going forward. You'd obviously take the guy who maybe has a chance mentally of overcoming some things, and Trubisky clearly does not.
Trubisky better yards per attempt, better. I don't think he's better touchdown. Yeah, he's better touchdown interception ratio. He's better completion percentage by 5%. Now he plays in Chicago, which is a little bit better than Buffalo, but not all that much better.
It's not that big of a difference.
The thing that was interesting last year, he's also 5 games above 500, where Allen is 3 games. I mean, they're not that dissimilar. Now you tell a Bears fan, you're like, hey, look, Trubisky's actually better. They'll get mad because, the Bears offense was atrocious last year, like yards per play, all that kind of stuff. The Bills weren't that much better. The question, because when you circle it back though, it's a question. It's a question about is Trubisky going to be the future of the Bears? No. Did he have some moments? Yes. But it's not a complete flop in the Josh Rosen sense of the word, right? He's been a playable quarterback for about half the games of his career. That's not good enough, but it's something.
Trubisky, 64 passing grade last 3 seasons. Josh Allen, 60.2. So I mean, they're right there. It's the running thing, though, right? With either one of those guys, you're going to have to be able to run them to succeed. Well, and Josh Allen at least has a chance.
Well, last season, Trubisky carried the ball 20 fewer times than he did the prior season, despite playing a game extra. It very much felt like, Nagy was sort of trying to prove to the decision makers in Chicago that Trubisky couldn't succeed unless Nagy put it on a platter for him, right?
Yeah, but I also think that was an injury thing, right? He was banged up, and it was look, we're not going to take the risk of injuring this guy. If we're going to succeed, he's got to be able to throw the ball, and so we're going to give him a chance to throw the ball. And that isn't necessarily fair. I mean, I don't know the extent of the injury thing. That isn't totally fair to Trubisky, but I would guess that if you're looking at both of those guys and you say, what's a path to them being successful? The path that leads to Josh Allen being successful allows for a lot more running of the football from the quarterback position.
Let me make a poll here. Let me make the second time in 3 episodes we're going to make a poll. Who is better? Mitch Trubisky or Josh Allen? I'm going to tweet it out here.
I'm going to guess that people feel very strongly in Josh Allen's
I think
favor.
it'll be like 70-30, Josh Allen.
You think that? I think it would be 90-10.
Okay. I'm regressing in the market then, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt right now it's Josh Allen, but if you go back and you take a look at where they were as prospects, it's very interesting. Okay. We're going to move on to a little Dak discussion here. And
Dak discussion.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a theory, and I'm curious what you think about this theory here. So Stephen Jones comes out and says, hey, there's some math that says you can't compete for a Super Bowl if you are paying a quarterback, this much of
20. The first 20 votes were for Josh Allen.
There you go. And he's saying this while the team that he represents is paying Ezekiel Elliott, signed him to a contract 2 years before they needed to, that is paying him more than any other running back out there, and yet is kind of balking at paying Dak Prescott, not the highest. I think they could probably get a deal done for what, like 35 maybe per year, which would put him right there with Russell Wilson, certainly below the 40 million threshold, but you're not resetting the market there. You could probably get him for something that's not resetting the market. And I know this probably sounds a little crazy, but are they stalling right now? Maybe because of the unknown with the pandemic. Could they be looking at this and saying, hey, we don't know if this season is for sure going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be some forecasts around the salary cap that say, and there have been some already, but some more kind of solid proof that the salary cap is going to come down maybe $50-70 million.
Mm-hmm.
And we just need to find a way not to put all this money into Dak just quite yet.
Yeah, I was asked this question on our friend Soren Petro's show, and I said it's scary, right? Because some of these teams have a lot of big contracts, and they don't have that many people under contract next year. And like, it's not, the league is going to give, I think, some allowances to teams, right? That, they'll allow them to delay the contract, but new contracts are going to be dicey, right? Mm-hmm. So don't you think though, that would just be a call to get this deal done as quickly as possible?
Maybe, but do
you know what I'm saying? Because if let's say that in August we find out that the season's only 12 games long, the salary cap next year is down 40%, and all this kind of stuff. I'm just throwing numbers out there. Jerry Jones isn't going to get to go to the league and say, yeah, but we don't have a quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. The Chiefs, if they sign Mahomes to a big deal, like let's say now, they can go to the league and say, hey, we didn't know, You know what I'm saying? Because the new money available to sign the big players next year, I agree, it's going to be dried up. But that to me, that just means to lock in the play. And Dallas, I love what Dallas is doing almost everywhere. And I think it's unfair, frankly, in some sense, to get on them about Zeke when they waited and then eventually toppled, right? Like, there's smart people in the Dallas Cowboys organization that caused that holdout to happen, caused the delay to happen. And right. They lost the battle, right? And I'm, I think that the uncertainty would cause me, if I'm running a team, to hoard the players, to sign the players that I need to have in the future right now.
Okay, but could you say, if we kick the can down the road to next offseason and the cap has gone down a ton, that we could then say, hey, we'll sign you, but this is, we're bound by the cap here, and we've got to pay you this. And then you get this incredible deal?
I don't think the players are going to think that way, though, because there's always going to be a team. I mean, the play that they might be making is
what if the cap goes, what's the cap going to be, $215 million next year? If it goes down $70 million, then there's going to be no room to sign these guys, right?
Yeah, maybe, but the tricky part is what's going to happen with the franchise tag, right? Because the rules of the franchise tag are the top, the average of the top 5 players in position. That'll probably still be the same, even if
Right.
things go. So signing Dak to the franchise tag is only going to be a plausible situation if they scale that down with the cap, right?
Right.
I don't know what are the alternative is to go with Andy Dalton, which I actually don't hate, right? I don't think Dalton sucks, and McCarthy's a pretty good coach, and all that kind of stuff. But it would be a shame, I think, if they've groomed Dak for all this time and ultimately he doesn't get to, they don't get to see it pan out, and it'd be a shame for Dak because where's Dak going to play?
Right. Well, but
it's the same question about Cam Newton.
No, it is. And here's what I'm wondering if the Cowboys are thinking. If they're going, okay, if the Seahawks, let's say the cap goes way down. Now, I think there would be some kind of league bailout, to be honest with you, because I don't think that the NFL would go, oh, yeah, we can just slice the cap by $70 million and let the teams figure it out. So to me, there'd be some kind of bailout. But let's say that they're looking at this and they go, okay, who are the guys that are being paid the most? It's Russell Wilson. It's Ben Roethlisberger, it's Aaron Rodgers, it's Jared Goff, it's Kirk Cousins, it's Carson Wentz. Those are the guys in average per year that are higher than Dak right now on the tag. And you look at that and you go, okay, how many of those teams do you actually feel have a chance to win the Super Bowl? I'm asking you. Of those guys, it's what, Wilson and Rodgers?
I don't even think Rodgers. Honestly, I think that's a 9-10 win team. I mean, Steelers probably have a better chance to win the Super Bowl than the Green Bay Packers do.
Okay, I can get on board with that.
So, and it's not that many. And frankly, Seattle is only a contender because of Wilson.
But they look at those, right. But they look at those quarterbacks and you go, okay, well, why are those guys making that much money? And you look at Jared Goff and it's like, okay, well, because he had a chance to set the market and they did. Why is Kirk Cousins making that much money? He had a chance to set the market and they did. And what it was an overpaying of a guy because the team was so worried about losing them. And they go, okay, if we end up having the cap slashed and we've already paid Dak a contract that's commensurate with that, we are in a place where we can't win because Dak isn't Russell Wilson. So I do think there's a bit of this, and the way that Stephen Jones said it is going to anger some people because I think what he's really trying to do is maybe kick the can down the road and say, we're not going to do this quite yet because if we find ourselves in a situation where the cap is contracted and we're paying Dak Prescott $35 million a season, then we're going to have to make some cuts in other places and we're just going to have no shot.
And maybe they think, as we might, that he's a quarterback that's extremely dependent on the external stuff, right? And
all of those guys are, except for Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So it's a tricky one. It's very much a tricky one. And I think what I don't like, there's a couple things about this story that just irk me. The first one is that anybody can use the phrase analytics to sort of, and it's like this way with the pandemic too. It's like anybody can use data or analytics to like talk out of both sides of their mouth sometimes if people aren't being rigorous, right? So it is pretty like clear that if you pay your quarterback too much of a fraction of the cap and you slough off everywhere else, that you're not going to be a good football team. Like that's true, right? We wrote about that last year.
Right. I mean, the point would be
about Dak. But the Cowboys have not done that. The Cowboys are actually pretty throw the Zeke contract out, and they're pretty smart.
That's a big one to throw out, though.
Well, right. And so then but then we just talked about like the Zeke thing sucks, but it's not. The Zeke thing wasn't a product of the Cowboys being as an organization being stupid. Yeah. The Zeke thing was the product of ultimately caving, right, to, I think, public pressure and also sort of like the Carolina Panthers sort of situation where they're like, because at this time last year, Dak wasn't considered all that good. And they're like, well, we need to face the franchise.
Dude,
and it's like
Zeke in 2022 is going to be nearly 8% of the cap.
Yeah, believe me, I'm not saying the contract is smart. I'm saying that the contract I'm saying that the Dallas Cowboys are not any
be a
more
shrewd
dumb than anybody
yeah,
else
yeah.
because they have that one contract on their books.
Here's another kind of interesting question. Could the Cowboys trade Zeke still?
Um,
Would someone trade for Ezekiel Elliott?
the Jets? No, I'm just kidding. What if
The
Josh
Jags?
Allen stinks this year? Like not stinks, but like Trubisky's this year. Like Trubisky last year, but like right?
Are you saying the Bills trade for Zeke Elliott?
They're
Because I
too
don't think
smart too. That's the
they're a smart
problem.
organization.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a team where they're like, gosh, we're really just missing that. Like 1989 Vikings type.
I mean, the
BS.
Texans, I feel like the Texans would just offer Watson for Elliott because they're trying to get rid of all of their good players and trade for running backs.
The Rams, maybe? The Rams don't have draft picks.
It's just a question because his contract becomes pretty much untenable and you can't cut him. And I'm trying to think of how they would move salary in a situation like this. But I keep coming back to what Stephen Jones was saying is not, hey, I'm referencing analytics and there's some, I think he knows. I think what he's trying to say without saying it is, we don't think Dak Prescott is Russell Wilson. We don't think Dak Prescott is Patrick Mahomes.
Which you can't say publicly.
Which you can't say publicly. And if the contract gets signed now under this salary cap, and the salary cap because of COVID-19 just takes a nosedive, we're in a position far worse than the Rams or the Vikings find themselves right now, which is a quarterback that is not top 5 that's getting paid top 5 money. And that's where we can't succeed because those quarterbacks are reliant on their supporting cast, and that will eat up too much money for us to build a very good supporting cast.
All right, let's plant the flag here then, okay? Let's say this is, and I don't mean to insult Dak this way, but let's say that it's a Brock Osweiler Denver situation where they have their number.
Mm-hmm.
He has no intention of going underneath that number, and it didn't work out for Denver because the quarterbacks they replaced Brock with sucked. But I still think it was obviously a smart process because Brock was shown to be a fraud later on. If they say, look, Dak, like we're not paying you this much money, and he says, okay, well, I'm not playing, and they go into the season with Andy Dalton, are you still betting over that win total?
No.
Okay, because I could be convinced to.
I could be convinced to as well if it were a vacuum. But here's the problem. I like Andy Dalton as a backup. The place where Andy Dalton doesn't quite get it done for me, and Bruce talked about this, was he's not going above and beyond. And in that locker room has got to be super tough. And in situations where you've got to have it, I want Dak on my team over Andy Dalton 10 times out of 10. So I would make a concession up to a certain point. But the place where they've erred is not having a conversation with Dak last season, last offseason, getting this done then. Now they're in a really tough situation. You can't make a hard cutoff, though. I mean, that's the thing, right? You've got to kind of have a sliding scale where it's like, hey, here's the places that we can make some exceptions. We can get you to this number and show you some good faith. And if you don't want to accept that, then okay, then we're not going to do it and we're not going to sign anything. And I think Dak is a reasonable enough person to do that. I mean, Dak's got to be in a situation too where he goes, okay, if I decide not to play and then the salary cap goes down, I could be in a real, this is $32 million that I might never see again. Right?
Yeah, no, he's a former 4th-round pick, right? So it's a different calculus for him.
And if he goes
somebody
to another
who's picked
team,
in the top 10 or something.
If he goes to one of the reasons he's making so much money outside of football is because he's the quarterback for the Cowboys. Like he should understand how valuable it is to be the quarterback of the Cowboys and to be winning as the quarterback of the Cowboys. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Here's a funny thing that I was thinking about this weekend. What if it comes out that the Cowboys are waiting to sign him because he hasn't been he hasn't been really faithful to the whole social distancing and quarantining, and they want to make sure they don't pay a guy that ends up getting coronavirus.
Yeah.
That's my conspiracy theory of the day.
I mean,
He
like
had a
I said, I
party
think
with Zeke.
I think Dallas is getting a little bit of Dallas as an organization is getting a little bit of unfair criticism because of what the Joneses have acted and said, right? But at the same time, those guys are the trigger, and we can't give Dallas a ton of credit if Jerry's the only one drafting on draft night and he does great, and we can't, and then not give him criticism because he's the one that is paying Zeke and then not paying Dak.
By the way, Josh Allen 89%, Mitch
I
Trubisky
know.
11%. I'm spot on.
You're sharp. Look, 321 votes too, at least.
That's incredible.
But the comments are actually my favorite. Like our friend Jack Dufflin. Do I want to get poked in the right eye or the left eye?
Ooh.
Somebody tweeted the Pam picture. They're the same picture. I like the comments more than anything.
Someone has a Bortles greater than Trubisky, greater than Allen, greater than Herbert, which is really not great.
Which segues, I think, into our simulation here, because the thing, and I muted the comments because I just couldn't take it, but the Los Angeles Chargers in our simulation do very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote this myself before I did the simulation. When you look at 7.5 for their win total, I have a hard time going under. But the math, the simulation suggests that they're going to be bad. Now, and I think it's entirely the quarterback and not to be mean, but the head coach quarterback situation is one of the worst in the league.
Well, let's think about this for a second. They have the Chiefs on one side who are going to, they're just the Chiefs, right? So they're going to trounce them. They've got the Broncos who've gotten a lot better. And the Broncos have always had a worse quarterback than the Chargers. And yet somehow there's not a huge gap between the Chargers and the Broncos, right? Like the Chargers have managed to play worse than they should have, given that they've had a better quarterback. And now all of a sudden they don't have that quarterback. And I think it will be an eye-opening experience for a lot of people who have not given Phillip Rivers a lot of credit for being pretty decent when they see Justin Herbert out there trying to do some things. And you go, oh, this is what happens when you have a quarterback that doesn't know what he's doing in a situation where, maybe it was a little harder to actually do good things than we initially anticipated. The tough thing about this, and this is where I struggle, because you look at the two teams in our simulation with the best chance at being the worst, best chance at winning the fewest number of games. And it's the Jaguars and the Chargers. And you go, okay, the difference between those two teams feels drastic, right? Like you look at the Jaguars and you go, man, they have no talent on this team. You look at the Chargers and you go, wow, they have a ton of talent on this team. Is it really the case that Gardner Minshew is that much better than Justin Herbert?
Well, we're forgetting a Tyrod Taylor too, right? Like, Tyrod, the last time he had his chance to swing the bat was terrible, for the Browns. And even for the Bills, he was extremely limited, and they propped him up because, frankly, Sean McDermott and his coaching staff are really good. So I see that combination as not being functional. I also see like a level, like there's always a Chargerness to everything too. There's the injuries. There's the, not having a home field advantage. There's the, all that kind of stuff. Whereas Jacksonville has a lot of those too. They don't have a great home field advantage. But I think Marrone and Minshew is not a standard deviation better than those two, but better. And their schedule, they played in the AFC South.
Right.
You look at the Chargers' first 5 games on the road against the Bengals. That could very well be a loss. I know the NFL did them a solid and put it at 4:00, but it's still the Bengals. Tell me the Bengals don't have a better coach quarterback combination than the Chargers do.
Well, if you're trotting out, if both teams are healthy and one has Joe Burrow and one has Justin Herbert, I mean,
I don't even know what the line is for that game, but I think it's probably a pick 'em. So they could lose that game. They play at quote home against the Chiefs. They play at home against the Panthers, which again, I think that game is a lot closer than people realize. Then they go on the road to Tampa, and then they go on the road to the Saints. They could start the season 1-4 very easily.
And then it's kind of a spiral, because here's the problem, and I mentioned this a little while ago, is that team has a group of supporting cast players that are there to win, right? And when all of a sudden it's very clear that there's one thing that's holding them back, and it's quarterback. And here's the other thing. Cam Newton's a free agent right now. Like, you don't think there are guys in that locker room that just go, okay, I don't know if they're looking at, PFF grading or whatever, but like, hey, Cam Newton's out there. He once had a season where he had an 87 PFF grade. I've currently got this guy in Justin Herbert. Let's just throw a number out there. Let's say it's 55 through the first 5 weeks. You're like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you're not giving us a chance to win by picking up this guy that's an obvious, obvious upgrade over what we could have had. And that's how I think it snowballs. And that's one of the things in simulating a season that's important to be able to model, is where do these things just crater? And the Chargers, as you illustrated, have that possibility to crater.
And the middle part of their schedule, they go Jets at home, Dolphins on the road, Jaguars at home. Like, they could win those 3 games. But if you get significant uptick from Darnold, significant, Tua plays or Fitzpatrick plays, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you get Minshew. Like, that's not – and then they go, Raiders, Broncos, Bills, Patriots, Falcons. Like, that's not a cakewalk either. And then they finish with Raiders, Broncos, Chiefs to finish it off. And by then, like, we saw what happened to them last year. Once the bottom fell out, they were not competitive, and there was that Vikings game where they were barely underdogs at home, and they play okay for a quarter and a half, and then Rivers fought. And here's the other thing. I want to, with the Chargers, I think Rivers being so bad last year for him, I think Chargers fans and people that analyze the Chargers don't realize how much of an upgrade he still would be over Herbert or Tyrod Taylor. Don't we think?
All 12 of those people.
You know what I'm saying? Because he didn't play well last year. He threw interceptions. He fumbled. He was not great. But he had that team, like, in position to win a lot more than they should have, right? Mm-hmm. Or he failed in positions that they should have won in, right? Whatever. Like, do you think we're all underestimating Rivers when projecting the Chargers this year?
I agree. I agree with you 100%. And for him to have been that bad, I think is a little of 2 things. He's probably the worst quarterback to have of the group of good quarterbacks that are out there if your situation is a little suboptimal. Because I don't think he's the type of guy that's like, I'm going to create something out of nothing here. He needs something there, and then he can execute it. But this also illustrates that the Chargers had some suboptimal situations that if you bring Justin Herbert in there, there's no way he's doing better than Phillip Rivers is in those situations. So I agree with you. I have a couple of questions here. So you can go to pff.com and check out the whole article on the simulations. But there were some things that stuck out to me that I want to have a discussion about. So I'm going to read the 5 teams that we have with the best chance to win the Super Bowl. And you can stop me when you think there's a team worth discussing. Kansas City Chiefs, 20%. Baltimore Ravens, 13%. San Francisco 49ers, way too low, a little under 10%. New Orleans Saints are actually a little ahead of the – sorry, I have this filtered incorrectly. Give me 1 second here. Okay, now I have it up. So Kansas City, Baltimore, New Orleans ahead of San Francisco. Then there's San Francisco. And then in number 5 is the Tennessee Titans.
Yep.
Now, how, I guess, is the best question.
Here's the thing. How much do you take Tannehill from last year seriously?
And this is what I came back to.
Because to me, that's how it has to happen. Because we regress our initial ratings towards the market, and that hurts Tennessee. The more you do it, the more it hurts Tennessee. which is something, right? It's something to consider. But at the same time, we also regress, and this was a tricky thing, and we just started doing it. We regress basically past performances by how distant they are. And as much, you take the playoffs, like Tannehill played pretty well, and he got better as the season went on. Like as far as fundamentally, and even when you look at clean pocket stuff, Tannehill, negatively graded throw rate, down a ton. Positively graded throw rate, up a ton. Like so, I mean, and then that division stinks, right? So there's a ton of advantages that they have that I think people are underlooking.
So I did the same thing, and the one outlier here is Tampa Bay, who we just don't know a lot about yet, right? And I could see them easily vaulting, into that top five. To me, that they're in that top five. Another team that's on the outside looking in is probably Dallas. But here's what did it for me. Let's look at the other teams that are in this second cluster of sorts. You've got Seattle, right? Russell Wilson is amazing, but there are a lot of question marks outside of Russell Wilson on that team. Green Bay, question marks everywhere, right? Who the hell knows what they're doing? Minnesota, yeah, they have a ton of rookies, but that's a big question mark. They lost Stephon Diggs. Like, who knows how that whole acclimation process is? You've got the Rams and the Colts. Like, the point I'm trying to make is after you get outside of that top 4 to 5, you can just – and there is a big drop-off. That's the reason I read it in order without actually saying the percentages. There's a big drop-off from 4 to 5. And once you drop off that whole group, it's like I really don't know which team has the fewest question marks. And if you're going to say, hey, the biggest question mark for me with the Titans is that Ryan Tannehill performed excellently under pressure, and I expect that to regress, okay. But he was also fantastic, as you mentioned, from a clean pocket. And so I should take solace in that. And the rest of the team, there's not a ton of huge question marks, right? Like, there aren't. Whereas, with all of these other teams, there are question marks that are out there. So I don't know that you can say the Titans are necessarily way worse or worse than that group that I just mentioned.
And you look at their schedule, this is sort of the why we had to sort of pull the schedule together. If you add up the number of wins, so first off, the number of wins above replacement on that team, if you add them up, the Titans actually were either first or second last year. It's not a bad roster. They get a little bit better on defense with Christian Fulton in the draft. I think that they can have some fun there. But let's look at the first 5 games this season. At Denver, which is tough. September in Denver is tough. Home to the Jaguars, at Minnesota. Then they have 3 consecutive home games against teams that were in the playoff hunt last year, but I don't think are better than them. Home to Steelers, home to Bills, home to Texans.
Yeah.
Then they come here, right, and go to the Bengals. Then they have Bears at home. Then they have Colts at home. They have like what is this? 6 of their first 9 games or something like that are at home. Like it's what you said. You get off to a great start, and then you can get healthy, right? And then you can get sort of build up for the playoffs. They have the AFC North, which is tough, maybe, and they have the NFC North, which is tough, maybe. But there are a ton of simulations where the NFC North doesn't have a good team. There are a ton of simulations where the AFC North is the Ravens and then a bunch of crap. Like, I think it plays out well for them. And then to your point, like, it's not that they're a favorite to win the Super Bowl. It's that among the sort of secondary or the tertiary, Chiefs are sort of in their own group, and then some secondary teams, the Titans are the first in that tertiary group, is because of a lot of the fundamentals that I think people are overlooking. And we've never been all that high in the Titans. So if we are, I think you should pay attention.
Yeah, it was super, surprising to me, and it was a great thought experiment, and it illuminated that there is this jumble of teams in the middle. A couple of teams that I also wanted to talk about that are sort of in this group, but I can't decide if they belong or not. The 2 teams, both have quarterbacks that I think we both like, are the Texans and the Eagles. And I don't know which one I feel is more kind of deserving of a higher, a little more, respect. I could go back and forth. The tough thing for the Texans is I do feel they have a lot of question marks outside of
Yep.
Deshaun Watson. And the Eagles have really seemed to kind of solidify those. Do you think those two teams belong in that jumble of teams that we just discussed?
I don't think Houston does. I mean, I love Watson as much as anybody, but I just have a hard time seeing it this year. I think we're lower on the Eagles than we should be. And part of that is the market, I don't think, likes them as much. But part of it is just that the Eagles fundamentally were just a bad team last year.
Mm-hmm.
Injuries were a huge part of it, but also part of it was just that they weren't efficient at anything, and they didn't cover. Like they were bailed out by the fact that they had a simple, like, to make the playoffs, they had to go through who? They had to go through Washington. They were down double digits to Washington. They had to go through New York. They were down double digits at home to New York in December of last year. They beat, they didn't have a good season last season. And, they can recoup a lot. And we talked about this with Minnesota. Like, it's going to be really hard for them to acclimate if there's reduced practice time. I kind of want to, when you look at their schedule at Washington, which last season Washington had them down 17-0 in the first quarter or first half of that game. They're on the road there. They have home to Rams. The Rams will be. I don't think they'll be terrible. Then they have home to Bengals. Then they go to San Francisco, and then at Steelers. Like, that's not an easy start to the season. And then, yes, they have the 3 home games starting with, and I want to get this joke off, Ravens at Eagles, which is, perfect for old Thomas being in the city of brotherly love. Hat tip to Josh Prisco. And then they finish with Giants, Cowboys in their 3-game homestand. So their schedule is a little harder than I think people see when they see, 2 games against Washington, 2 games against New York. But I do think they should be higher in relation. I'm not sure why they aren't.
I think that's great. City, that's great. Here's the reason I think that the preseason simulation will be lower on them. They are relying on a lot of things regressing back up at the same time. And those rely on some rookie contributions, right? The wide receiver position. We need Jalen Reagor. They need Jalen Reagor to be good. The linebacker position. They need those 2 draft picks in Wallace and Taylor to be able to come in, at least one of them. They need Wallace, right? To be able to come in and play decently well in coverage. And there are some question marks still. Is Andre Dillard going to be, the option there for them at left tackle? What's their offensive line has been great for so long. Does it continue? Those things are big enough that I think there is a reason to push them below the Minnesotas, the Dallases, the Indianapolises of the world, because those teams, I think, have a few more kind of just people you can count on in those positions of value. So I do think we're a little low on them, but I think it's warranted given some of the question marks.
And then the other thing is Doug Peterson is excellent in things that require some positive variance. And sure, in some things he's a little weaker, which I hope this isn't the case, but I could see them leaning into Miles Sanders, which is a good thing relative to running the football with a bad player, probably not a good thing relative to throwing the football. And that might lead to some things that are a little suboptimal for them that are sort of underneath the initial sort of collection of analyses. But
no, I'm with you there. Okay. You can go check out the article with all of our simulation takeaways, but for the podcast, what's the actionable takeaway that you've got based on simulation 1.0?
I think the Titans plus 175 to win the AFC North is a very good bet.
The South, you mean?
The South, yeah. So AFC South.
It'd be incredible if they won the AFC North, though.
Well, they used to be in the AFC Central when they were the Oilers / Titans. So maybe that's where my mind. And here's another one. And this one I saw on Bet Online. It's actually less than break even other places. But the moment that the New Orleans Saints become plus something to win the NFC South, I think you have to at least sprinkle, especially if, I don't know if we gave this out but I think both of us have positions on Tampa Bay when they were like plus 200, plus 180, all that kind of stuff to win the NFC South. But once New Orleans gets to like they were plus 110 last week to win the NFC South. I think that you have to at least, entertain that, just given, their dominance in that division over the past few years, the, relative, the probability being so small that the Carolina Panthers will win that division, and, the fact that the Falcons somehow find a way in the wrong way, usually. That's basically, if you could basically arbitrage that if you have a decent Tampa Bay position at this point.
All right, I've got two. The first is the Detroit Lions to win their division, plus 700. And this is based on, I don't think any of the other teams in that division have done a lot to get better, right? Like, I think the Vikings did, but maybe not this year. And if you just look at how good that team was with Matt Stafford healthy last year, that offense is phenomenal. And I know they took a running back in the second round, but like they are still an offense that I would be worried about. 7-1, those are too good to take. I just think that division, those two teams at the top, it's a crapshoot. So if you're getting 7-1, I love that. But here's the one that stuck out to me the most, and that's Kansas City to win the Super Bowl. And there's always this, they won it last year, with the MVP or the Super Bowl. I just can't envision it happening again because football is all about parity. But in a season where all of these things are going to be up in the air, the advantage that it would give to a team that knows what they're doing at the coach and the quarterback position, I just don't think can be understated. Mm-hmm. And to me, if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs and you go, wow, that they're plus 750 to win the Super Bowl, so are the Ravens. The Chiefs, to me, just, it sticks out. It's like, oh, yeah, they've got Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And no matter what happens, I have faith in that duo being great. And I'm not sure you can say that about any other team, even the Ravens with Harbaugh and Jackson. Like the Chiefs, Mahomes, and Reid in a situation where you don't know what's happening next week, that's something that I would want to bet on.
Yeah, and the break even there is about 11%. As you said a little bit earlier, I mean, we have 12%. We have it at about 20, which I think is a little high, but here's the thing. We do a decent amount of regression for coach and quarterback changes. We do a decent amount of regression towards the market. And Kansas City got 20 of 22 starters back. The one draft pick that they have is, I think, going to be, he's replacing a player who was a tenth of a win below replacement in Anthony Hitchens. Running back, obviously, it's whatever at that position, but they do shore up some situations. The COVID-19 is going to present a lot of challenges, whether it's because, player tests positive, a player, all that kind of stuff. There's going to be more players missing games this season, I would envision, than usual. The more your team's success can be concentrated on a few things, I think the better, as long as those things are awesome. And the Chiefs, no other team's fate is more concentrated on the health and the performance of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, right? And
it's a great way to put it. Yep.
And if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt, the Chiefs are screwed. We saw Matt Moore. I still think Matt Moore beating the Vikings is one of the best wins in franchise history, just for what it meant. Got him a 2 seed, all that kind of stuff. But they're screwed long term if he gets hurt. Yep. But with every other situation, I mean, we were talking about this with our friend Timo on Twitter. Marshall Yanda retires. What does that mean for Lamar Jackson's yards before contact running the football? We just talked about it with the Eagles. Like, their quarterback, I think pretty highly of Carson Wentz. But when all the receivers got hurt, that went to hell. Like, there's so many things that are so dependent upon interconnectedness that a team like the Seattle Seahawks, a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who put so much on one player's shoulder, might actually be a better play for these tail events like the Super Bowl than they are in normal years.
You just reminded me of something. Remember when Marshall Yanda was hurt and the Ravens with Joe Flacco were playing the Jaguars?
Yeah,
You remember
because
that
our
game by
boss at the
chance?
time, or our boss Rick, was like, "Why did you tell me to bet on the Ravens in London? Because they lost like 35-0 or something."
I remember having this, like, we had this argument, we're like, does it really matter that much? I was like, Calais Campbell's just going to eat. Oh, man. You make fantastic points there, and that's exactly what I was thinking about with the Chiefs. It's like if you only had to count on one or two people in a situation where you have no idea if the person to your left or to your right will be there and will be able to be counted on, that to me is a lot of reason to bet on that team. And their
Can I
Chiefs
circle
are the
back to
epitome.
another one though?
Yeah, you got one left.
Okay. It's also why betting on the Chiefs to win the AFC West is a terrible bet. For the same reason that betting on them to win the Super Bowl is, I think, a sage bet. Betting on them to win the AFC West at -400 or -450, wherever, is an absolutely dreadful bet because of how tailored they are to Patrick Mahomes, right? If I need the implied probability to be 80 or 90%, then I don't want it all tied to one thing. If I need it to be 11 or 12%, I want it tied to one thing. You see what I'm saying? So if you're going to bet the Chiefs, I think over their win total is a bad bet. I think to win the AFC West is a bad bet, but I do think to win the Super Bowl is a good bet, to your point.
I'm with you there. All right. Anything else?
No.
I think that's it.
I think this is was a fun time. I think we're still deciding on who we're going to have on the show Thursday.
Yep, we got to figure that out. But we can do it. No one's going anywhere. So
no one is going anywhere. I might walk to Starbucks now that it's open again, but
wow.
That's as far as I'll go. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah, I've got to put my mask on and go to the grocery store at some point. My issue is that I have like this bandana that I've been tying on. I look like a complete idiot, and it keeps falling down my face like halfway through the store. So I'm like walking around the store like scrunching. Yeah, it's whatever.
I might order contacts again just because I hate breathing into my mask and it fogs my glasses up. Obviously, all these complaining is, tongue in cheek, of course, for people who have real problems that are dealing with, but like that sucks.
Yep. I'm with you there. All right. Well, stay safe. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back on Thursday. Have a great week. Peace out.